everyone, and welcome to the program. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. My name is Billy Dees, and if you've never been here before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. A little bit of both today. Sara Alessandrini is on the studio line. Sara, always great to have you.
Thank you for having me here again.
Sure. Sarah's been here before and she will be again. Sara is very accomplished when it comes to politics and media, all that kind of stuff. She produced a documentary called This Is What New Yorkers Say. And it centers around the media flurry that was around Andrew Cuomo, both when he was a media darling. And of course, the one thing the media loves to do more than build somebody up is tear them down, right? And this is it's 4 parts. Is that correct? 4 parts?
It's 5 part. Yeah, it's the interviews are 4 parts, and then there is the intro, which is the archival footage and tells the story.
Awesome. Very worth checking out because it's kind of like a microcosm of what happens in the media in general. So it's a great thing to check out. And she is now on Substack. You can find Sara on Substack. And we're going to talk about one of her articles more in depth. And she's going to update a lot of the things that are happening in New York. But the post in Substack was the problem with Zohran Momdani is not what he says, but what he doesn't say. And of course, he is the mayor of New York City. So, first of all, I've checked out the post on Substack. It is extremely well done, very well researched and everything, like all your stuff is. And I'll preface this by saying this. You've probably heard me say this before. I'm of a certain age, and I've seen a lot of things, both in my dealings with people personally, in business, in society at large, whether it be in our state or interstate. And I've run across a lot of people that are just men in particular that are just absolute fiends. Now, there's a lot of good people out there, but the ones that are really fiends, like the wife beaters and the fraudsters, those types of men, they all have one thing in common. You know what that is, Sara?
What is that? The smile?
The charm. They're charming. Absolutely charming. And they're the type of people, when you find out what they've been into, it's like, my God, he seemed like such a nice guy. He came to little Joey's birthday party and he was so sweet. It's always the same thing. And I know that, ugly behavior, like the guy who's standing on the bar stool in the local bar, shouting at the dance floor, hey, baby, shake that ass. He's probably not the guy that's going to try to slip a roofie in your drink. The guys that are going to do that are much more stealth than that. They are the charming ones. They know all the politically correct language. They know how, all the Me Too stuff. They got it all down. They wear the nice little sweaters with the golfing logos on them and, very well educated. And they're the ones that are going to get you. And I think, oddly enough, I think that's one of the appeals of Donald Trump is that who he is and what he is thinking is spilling out of his mouth all the time. Okay. And I think you don't have a pretender, like him or dislike him. He's not one way when he's with the rich folks, and he's not another way when he's at the trailer park. Okay. He's the same all the time. And I kind of feel this with Momdani, as he's just too likable. When there's a guy that's just too sweet and just too likable, I'm not into it.
And like even how he speaks so perfectly. The sound, the volume, everything is so soft when he speaks to the media. And you're like, if you actually pay attention to what he's saying, he's not saying anything. It's like a word salad, but he said it in a way that it's like, it makes so much sense. So you think that he's saying something so important when it's not.
Yes.
And so if you pay attention, yes, but I guess there are a lot of people that actually are not doing that kind of work that you're doing.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about him. He is born in Uganda, is that correct? And he became a U.S. citizen not even 10 years ago, 2018, something like that?
I mean, there are some people that are actually questioning why is that? Because from everybody's understanding of how, since he came here at 7 years old, his mother must have been a citizen because she was married to an American citizen before she married his father. So probably he could have been citizen and he was 18 years old. So there are people questioning why he waited until the last month, right before he actually started running for office to become a citizen. So there are questions there, but they're not main questions in the media right now.
Sure. Obviously, his campaign was built around being a lot of the things that Democrats typically extol. Whether they mean it or not is another thing. I'm not being political. I'm just as critical of the Republican Party. They all have their faults. They all have their little tricks up their sleeve. And usually it's the working class that gets championed in these movements, especially when you have a candidate that seemingly comes out of nowhere. But here again, this is all part of branding. As much as it is anything else.
I mean, and as an Italian also, let me say that it's very weird how here all politicians in America, they always have to bring up, I was poor when I was a kid, as if you have to justify where you are now in your life.
Yes.
Like if you were not poor at a certain point in your life, then I should not vote for you. Why is that? You should not vote. Actually, I would prefer to vote for someone who is not broke than someone who actually is broke. That should be normal. So you should not use that, to ride on that. I was poor once. I don't know what is that about.
So this caricature that we often get from left-leaning politicians, regardless of party, is that they're going up against the establishment. I'm going to stick it to the man, that type of thing. So that's the image I think a lot of Americans have of him, or especially the ones that voted for him. And the stick it to the rich type thing, I understand where that comes from. Okay, and it's worked for the Democrats. But the problem is, in my opinion, and I'm going to let you take it, is there comes a point when you can't have more people in the wagon than you have pulling it. And when you drive out the people, when you villainize business and the sources of that revenue for all the things you want to do, sooner or later that's going to collapse. So let's start with the impression that a lot of people might have of him and the reality. Where would you start with that?
I mean, I think that's been a thread in that article that I wrote, exactly what his branding is, what he said during the campaign, but also counteract that with the reality of actually how the system works. How you're saying, we can hate rich people, but also they're the one who are paying the most taxes in a way, because they're saying the top 1% pay 40% of the income taxes, especially for a city like New York City, but I think probably everywhere. So the top 10%, they pay 2/3 of the income taxes. So they pay a lot more taxes than the middle class. But that's the problem that actually we're seeing now, in the first month, because you're saying his branding was about the middle class, let's tax the rich. But what happened in the last 2 months, he's been in office for 2 months, pretty much, January and February. And what happened is that, of course, the governor said that we cannot tax the rich. The taxes are already high because, as I explained, obviously, I'm assuming your audience probably know the difference, how billionaires and millionaires pay taxes. Yeah. But millionaires, especially in New York City, it's one of the places where you pay the most taxes if you're a millionaire. So, and also because, even if you're across the river, you pay less taxes because there is a local New York City tax too. But besides that, so this year there is an election for the governor. So raising taxes on the year that there is an election, it's not really a smart move. So the governor has said we cannot increase taxes because people since COVID have already moved out. And again, just to cut your taxes, you don't even have to live working in New York City. You can just live in Jersey, Connecticut, or in Long Island or Westchester. So you can just be outside of the 5 boroughs and you're going to save yourself some taxes. So it's a very complicated situation. But again, you cannot really tax the rich. But now what Momdani said, because they found out, I don't know if you heard, I'm assuming you did, they found out that there is a big budget deficit.
Yes.
Which Momdani, as soon as he went into office, like he promised a lot of free stuff. But as soon as he went to office, he said, oh, I didn't know that we actually had $12 billion deficit over the next 2 years. So for this year and next year. So he said, oh, we didn't know. But actually, Mayor Adams already warned about the 12 billion deficit. And it's not because there are like the revenue is less. The revenue has been increasing, but the expenses that the city is doing, so you just have to live below your means. But I guess mayors don't want to do that. And Momdani not only doesn't want to live below the means, he also promised way more than what is currently available.
Yes.
So it's been this crazy situation. Like, and again, the thing like, oh, we didn't know. I made all my promise during the campaign because I didn't know what the situation was. They lied to us. But it's funny that like the person who found the budget deficit is the new comptroller. So he warned about that. But who was the previous comptroller was Brad Lander, who actually was pal with Momdani. And actually now he's running against another Democrats. So there is all that internal like feud between left and the far left. So there are all these dynamics. And so they must have known that there was already this budget deficit, but now he's pretending that he didn't know. And he blamed even Cuomo. Cuomo has not been in office for like 5 years. And they say that like he's been stealing money from the city to give it to the rest of upstate, which usually New York, like upstate is mad against New York City because all money goes to New York City instead of the rest of the state. So Momdani is saying, oh, we have been cheated by governments in general, Eric Adams especially, Cuomo especially, and he's not saying Kathy Hochul, even though she's been the governor for the past years. So if there has been a deficit for the past 2-3 years, that's on Kathy Hochul, obviously, but he's not saying that because he needed her for the campaign and he needs to support her for the next campaign. So it's all this crazy story. But then everybody's saying, we're not going to tax the rich. So he said, if you don't tax the rich, I'm going to increase property tax. So he's been threatening to increase property tax at like a 10% of what it currently is. So now people are mad and now they're learning what socialism actually is about. Because once you run out of rich people to steal money from for more taxes, you have to take it from the next people, which is like people that make 150,000. When they are done, you take it for people 50,000. So I'm from Europe. The middle class pays very high taxes compared to here because we also have less millionaires and we have less billionaires. So you still need a lot of money. So you take them from the middle class when you don't have as many billionaires and millionaires.
Yes.
So people are mad because if you increase property tax, that he has the power to do, but he has no power to increase income taxes or corporate taxes because that's on Albany to do it. So now that means that rents will increase and like in general, because the property taxes that homeowners will have to pay is going to be higher. And so for landlords, they're going to pass it down to the tenants.
Sure.
So he ran on affordability and now he's saying if he doesn't get his way, he's going to increase taxes for everybody. So even like the poor people. So that already, like after the first month, you already showed what socialism really is about.
Yes. You know, it's one of those things where people go to what they feel is right, not what in practical terms is. You know, getting back to this, stick it to the rich. I'm all for the extremely wealthy paying their fair share because they benefit the most from a safe, secure country with a secure banking system, with a very vibrant investment structure, and so on. They are the ones that can very easily dump a couple $1 million into the investment structure and benefit from it, where the average working person can't. But there are limits to that. You know, this idea that, oh, well, we'll just let the rich pay for everything. There's limits to that. And when I hear the left will often cite these small countries in Europe that have, universal health care. What they don't understand is with the United States, 330 million people, roughly half, 49% of people in the United States live on some sort of government assistance. Now, some of them earned it, Social Security and so forth, but that number is only going to get bigger, especially if we keep inviting people in and giving them benefits. As our population gets older and starts retiring, you're going to have 45% of the country pulling the weight of everybody else. These small countries that the left likes to cite in Europe have very small populations, and for the most part, they have productive populations. The United States, to a large degree, does not. These small countries in Europe don't really have to worry too much about defense because the United States takes care of that.
Yeah, that's like when I hear people say, oh, like European, they pay all their taxes on public health care and they don't pay in defense. Yes, because American citizens are paying that for them.
Yes, that is correct. And, the next time a wallpaper hanger starts making his way across Europe, it's the United States that's going to have to do something about it. And quite frankly, that's something that the United States has leveraged to its advantage. We complain about it, the fact that we have to carry that burden, but there's the part where we get our way a lot of times when in European politics because of that, and we bully our way. And here again, I'm just being objective. That's the truth. But what I'm getting at here is we have a huge population, and these measures in terms of the wealthy paying their fair share has its limits. You can't have a tax structure that is confiscatory. You just can't. There has to be incentives for people like Elon Musk and Ford and Stephen Jobs to create not only brilliant things for the economy, both in the United States and abroad, but they've changed our way of life. They really have. A lot of them were fiends. I mean, J.P. Morgan, Rockefellers, all those, they were bad dudes in a lot of cases. But I'll tell you what, they changed the framework of the world. They changed how people live. And you can't have that when you hold them down, when you punish them. It's not a good way to run your economy if you want a successful economy. Now, that's just the practical side of it. I'm sure Sarah could explain the finer points of how the economy works better than I could, but that's the thinking that the left just tosses aside. They just toss it aside. Speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about what this DSA is, the Democratic Socialists of America. Talk a little bit about that. What is that, and how is the mayor involved in this?
I mean, it's like an organization. It's not a party, but they endorse candidates and they have a lot of members. At the time I wrote the article, I think it was 80,000. What did I say? 80,000. But I think now it's like 100,000 and more, because obviously since this election with Momdani, that he is an endorsed member of the DSA, that more people like now they're signing up probably. So, but they're like a very far left organization. And I think a lot of people are very confused. Like they think that the DSA and like, because people talk about democratic socialism, right? And they think, oh, it's not socialism. It's like they like capitalism, but just with a strong safety net. But you can check out the website from like the DSA, and like they are very much against capitalism in all its forms. But they say, but of course, you're not going to change an economic structure overnight. So in the meantime, you start making changes here and there, like small bits, and then eventually you change everything. So, but they believe like very extreme stuff, like no one should be in jail. So freedom for all incarcerated people, like all of them. So, but it was funny because like people from the left, they think they are the only one who believes in like free speech and they are the democratic ones. Everybody else is a fascist. I watched this Zoom meeting from the DSA where they were talking about this freeing all incarcerated people. And a person was talking and said, if you have never been into a prison, don't challenge what we are saying. Trust what we're saying. It's like, that's not very democratic.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. So So yeah, and Momdani has always been part of that organization. So he gives like a percentage of, like, even when he was an assembly member, he would give like a percentage. I don't know if it was like 2%, something small. But when you're an endorsed member, you have to give that. And then there is both, like, there are local chapters. So he's part of the New York City chapter. But then there is also the main one, the national one. I don't know if you heard, I don't know, it was like a year ago or something, AOC. So she's a DSA member too, but she lost her endorsement over her position on Israel. So if you think that AOC is very much far left and very pro-Palestine, hate Israel, she lost endorsement because she voted to, like, when they had to build, I think it was like a defense system. So it was for Israel to build a defense system, so not to attack other countries, but it was like for its defense. So she voted for that. And so for the DSA, she was like a traitor. And there were like even people, I think they threw like stuff against her office, like paint or something like that. So like if you think like even AOC, for those people on the far left, she's not left enough.
Yes.
So which is scary, because especially like these politicians, they're like pushing people outrage. They're running on that outrage for people to get into office. But then eventually those people will come after you, because if someone is like such an extremist, they're gonna turn their back at you as soon as you do something different than what they expect, because now you created that kind of monster by keep pushing on them and empowering them. So that's where I think like everybody needs to be very careful, like especially if you're running as a politician, like things can really get very extreme. And I don't know if we can connect it to what happened this week. Actually, that was pretty crazy in New York, that there was that kind of terrorist attack.
Yes.
Did you hear about that?
Yes, and I was going to ask you about that, because there's that picture that went viral over that police officer that jumped over the railing, and he got his picture taken, and he's being hailed as a hero. And the only reason I wanted to ask you about that, and you can come to that later. But I don't know that anybody on the left has praised this guy as a hero. I don't know what it is about the left, but they just cannot praise law enforcement. But go ahead. Yeah, that whole
no. It was like a very insane situation. I think this is like its own conversation about what happened this week, because like how the media cover that. Like justifying certain things, like you can really see what's really going on wrong in the media and the conversation Democrats with this situation. So like it was pretty crazy for me, because I was busy and I saw there was a protest and there was violence, because I keep getting notification on my phone right from the newspapers and everything. So I thought, okay, there is just a protest and there is some violence. Okay, that can happen nowadays.
Sure.
And then the first thing I read was Momdani's post. So before even like an understanding of anything that happened, I read his post. And what he wrote was so insane. Because the first part talks about this person, Jack Lang, that he's a far-right influencer and everything. So he was condemning because this person did a protest that was against Islam, like, so all Muslim, like not extremism and everything. So obviously that's bad. And he condemned that, so which is good. And then he say, but what happened after was even worse, because there was violence. But when you read that, like he didn't talk about ISIS, he didn't talk about two individuals, he didn't say about the counter-protest. So when you read what he said, you think, oh, it was the far right who actually did the violence. And then it was, I think, on Instagram. So I like go right. And there was actually the statement from NYPD. And it was a completely different story. He was saying there were these two people that were ISIS sympathizers. So they were like extreme Islam supporters, like obviously. And so it was a completely different narrative than what Momdani said. I thought it was the far right who did the violence. Now, the protest, bad. Again, if you hate people just based on their religion, that's not good. Like that's need to be condemned, of course. But it's still, again, someone having bad opinion is not the same thing as someone throwing a bomb to anyone. They're not on the same level. But to see how and it's not just Momdani. I don't know if you saw what CNN wrote.
Yes. And they had to backtrack it.
Yeah, but I mean, it was insane. Like these two kids, like everything could have been nice if it wasn't that they got arrested for throwing a bomb. Like,
it's funny, but it's
I know it's funny. It's not funny.
yeah, it's funny, weird, funny.
I mean, that's CNN. Like that's the most, not in this country, respected, but like if you go outside of this country, people think it's a respected network.
Yeah, sure.
Like even New York Times, like even they didn't do it as bad, but even I think the New York Times, like anyway, how everybody reported on this. And I think it was another person on CNN that she said that also the bomb was at Momdani, which wasn't true because it was actually sent, like they were throwing the bomb to the far-right protesters and to the police. So, but you learn a lot from this episode, like what's the condition of information in this country, where like people don't want to say that there is, like, we all know, like not all Muslims are bad, but obviously there is terrorism in Islam. I mean, there is some terrorism in all kind of religion across the world. Obviously, like it's not that like every religion has like its own extreme. So should not be that you cannot say that these people were supporter like of ISIS. But when you're hiding that on purpose, because the NYPD apparently reported on that before even Momdani did the statement. So it's not that he didn't know. But how he manipulated, like he could have said the counter protest threw a bomb. He didn't have to mention the support of ISIS. He didn't have to mention that. He could have said two people that didn't agree with that. So at least because like what he wrote sounded like it was the far right people that threw the bomb. And that's so unfair to do that.
It is. It's very unfair to do that. You brought up an interesting thing about religion, and there's with Momdani, you have where I feel 90% of the distrust of him comes from his political leanings, the socialism, the tax the rich, let's take it easy on criminals. This whole attitude, I believe that's where a lot of it is. I would have to say that there's a certain anti-Muslim feeling that comes toward him too. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's Islamophobia. There probably is. There probably is some prejudice there because of religion. But I would argue too that there's a cultural thing with Islam. And it really depends on what faction of Islam and where the folks are from. For example, the United States is an exception when it comes to having a revolution that's successful. But one of the reasons why it is we didn't overturn our way of life. As a matter of fact, a lot of British principles are still in our government today. Congress, very parliamentary. Governorships are very much like nobility. Governor's pardon, that's a descendant of nobility. Our beliefs in terms of religion very similar to there is no separation of church and state. The Church of England is Christian. The arts, we love British rock stars, we love British actors. So it wasn't like we had to change the country. We just didn't want to be under a king. When we go into the Middle East, as the United States often does, as we have over the past couple of decades, and we kick in the door and we say, hey, we got this democracy thing here for you. Aren't you happy? And you don't get that because it's not always going to work that way. Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the absolute worst form of government except all the rest. And what he was basically saying, it's the least of all the evils. And I don't think you can presume that the least of all the evils in terms of types of government is best for everyone. So you have this culture that really doesn't embrace or respect presidents as much as they do leaders that are possibly chosen by God or chosen by war or whatever it is, whatever their backstory seems to be. And I think there is a certain legitimacy in worrying about, is the respect for democracy and the system that we have here, is it held by people that are from a different culture, from a different system altogether. So how do you dissect that? How do you know, let's say, the dislike of him is coming from his politics, or is the dislike of him coming strictly because of the Muslim faith? And if so, how much of it is legit and how much of it isn't? I think this makes a sticky situation to criticize somebody, because there's a lot of people that are just simply afraid to criticize because they don't want to get labeled as somebody who's a hater. So how do you dissect your way through that?
I mean, I don't know if you noticed, like in my article, I didn't even mention that he's a Muslim ever in the article, because to me, it doesn't matter. It's really not how I see him, because like what I see of him, it's really his extreme politics, what he says, and especially the thing that he has espoused in the past, and now he claims he never did espouse, like legalization of prostitution. Like you can have that as an opinion that you think that that's a good policy. It's fine. One person might disagree, but he was saying that for years, that he was for the legalization of prostitution. And then during the campaign, he also said that he never supported that. So at least don't lie like that. You can say, I changed my mind. You can say, but so to me, like the problem with Momdani is really like his policies. I like, as an immigrant, I don't even think about him as an immigrant per se, because to me, he has a very American personality. So like when you're from outside of the country, you can see the difference. Like it's funny how Americans, they always say like, oh, I feel so much Italian, I feel so much something. Like African American, they think they're so African, but when you're from outside the country, you're like, no, you're very much an American.
That's funny.
Like, yeah, so like to be like, when I think about Momdani, I see him as an American anyway. Like I'm sure his mom sees in a very different way. Like she say that he is not American, but to me, I see him that way. So I never even thought about like, yeah, there is definitely a problem with like immigrants coming to this country. Of course, like all kinds of immigrants, you have to subscribe to, like, you can always change some rules, but the culture, you have to accept the culture of the country you're going in. Obviously,
Yes.
to me, as an immigrant, is very important. You cannot like go to a country and demand changes for respect to your own personal beliefs. Like I know even in Italy, there have been a situation where I don't even know, because I come from a communist area. So like religion is not so important in my region as in other parts of Italy. But apparently they had like the crucifix in the classroom. And so there are debates because some people like from other religions, they feel offended that exists in the classroom. And I'm not going to support religion in the classroom because, of course, it's not my thing. But at the same time, I'm like, well, you're going to another country who has different culture. Like, you should not be offended by their way of life. And if it offends you, first of all, there are so many other countries in the world. You don't have to go to that specific country.
Yeah.
So to me, that when I hear those stories, I'm like always,
Yeah, Lewis Black, a comedian who happens to be Jewish, he said he went to Italy for 2 weeks. And he said that Jesus is like the Coca-Cola of Italy. And he said, I'm Jewish, and after 2 weeks in Italy, I'm thinking, okay, maybe you got something with this Jesus guy. I would say that it is part of the culture there, both in terms of religion, but a part of the, the history, the whole thing with the Romans and this and that. It's very much entwined with it. And when you go in there and say, well, we don't want to hear it because we believe in something else, it's part of the history, it's part of the fabric of the country. So I respect
and it's really not about like believing in Jesus. Like Italians, I feel they are not that religious as people think we are. Yeah, it's more like, oh, it's our culture, tradition. So like church as that part of like, it's part of the culture, but it's not like here people really devoting their life to Jesus. It's very different.
That's funny. I always that's one of the things, the perspectives you have. That's always so wonderful to get. While we're speaking about Italy's having its own little struggle with identity. I would say between the right and the left, and a lot of things going on.
Wait. Italy never had an identity.
Okay.
So it's very different.
Okay.
Like it's really like
to find one.
Yeah, no, they never tried. Like that's the thing. Like, well, Italy, of course, has always been very divided in a way.
Mhm.
So Italy became one country, like technically in 1861 or 70, depending like the time that it took to actually make it true.
Mhm.
So it's been like 150 years, pretty much, that Italy actually it's one country. So before we always had different areas, and so each region also is very different. Like the culture of each region is so different, and the language, because we all have our own. We call it dialect, but it's not a dialect; it's real different language.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of like differences, but that's what, like, to me, coming to this country, that's very different from there. Like here, there is constantly the conversation about who are we, what is this country about, what are we trying to achieve. There is that idea, whether you agree with the left or right, everybody has their own idea of what this country should be about.
Mhm.
Even if like you hate when the left said something, the right said something, but everybody is in line that we're trying to figure out what this is all about. In Italy, I never felt that conversation. It never existed. Like, we're just Italy, whatever it is. We're just like, we're not going to question. And that, I think that's part of the problem. Also, like, there is no patriotism in Italy at all. Like, like that's the thing. Like, if there was a war, Italians would not want to go. But not just because, of course, like no one wants to go to war and everything. But
Sure.
they would not do that. They would not give their life. They wouldn't, because they don't believe in that kind of stuff. Like they don't believe in something bigger than our own individual person.
I see.
So there has never been the conversation about, okay, what do we want to achieve in Italy? And that's why Italy never goes anywhere, because it's always like, okay, well, we're going to maybe change a couple of rules here and there. The right prefers certain rules, the left prefers certain rules, but there is no vision. Italy never had a vision and is not even looking for one. So that's very different.
Is the leader referred to as the prime minister or the president in Italy?
Depending who you're talking about. If you're talking about Giorgia Meloni, so that's prime minister, yes. And then there is a president, but the president doesn't have the same role as the president of the United States. So it's more like, I don't even know how I would compare. It's more like, okay, they decide if someone like certain roles, you can appoint certain people. And it's like more like a moderator. Let's say that.
Okay.
The president is more a moderator, but who's actually guiding the country is the prime minister.
Okay. Well, Prime Minister Meloni certainly has some conservative leanings, at least by American standards. Stopping immigration. Among other things. I would say, and here again, I obviously don't know the country or the culture as good as you do, but my feeling is she has given Italy a little bit different of an identity than what you have in France and Germany and places like that. I think she has a little bit more of a vibrance of an aggressiveness that you don't typically see in Europe. Am I right about that, or am I wrong?
Yeah, but yeah, I don't disagree. I'm like, I don't know if what are our standards here.
Yeah,
like she's definitely like different than a lot of our other leaders, and I think she's very serious and she's more interested in having a role. Yes, compared to other people, like that Italy has more a role in the conversation with Europe or with the United States. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, I always enjoy your perspectives. Going back to New York, let me say this. With the poverty situation in the United States, like I said, the rich are often villainized. Another area that often gets villainized is the food industry. And, well, the grocery stores are selling all this stuff. It's so expensive. They're making a killing. And quite frankly, most grocery stores are working on very narrow margins, largely because they have stock that perishes. They don't, you can't stick a head of lettuce on a shelf for 2 or 3 weeks and wait for it to get bought. You just can't do it. So if it doesn't sell, it rots. He has, I'm not exactly sure what his plan was, but it had to do with city-run grocery stores.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, I don't know if you saw actually Polymarket, Polymarket?
Mm-hmm.
They ran for a few days a free grocery store, like completely free. So that they did an experiment, and so they created this pop-up supermarket, like it was like a small one, so you could get actually free items. So that was actually interesting, and a lot of people were lining up for hours to go there, but it was completely free. Obviously, the one he would do would not be free, would have like. I mean, again, yeah. As I wrote in that article, the margin for that kind of industry, I think, is like the profit is 1%. It's not very high. It's very thin. So obviously, and we're talking about big corporation that normally can run very efficiently. They have multiple locations. They can get cheaper prices. So if you have only 5 locations, as he promises, that's going to cost much more than what probably would cost for other like a supermarket. But it was interesting that they did this experiment, and of course, they did everything for free, but it costed also money to them to have this experience. And people actually went there, but they were only allowed a bag, so you could only get whatever you could fit in that bag. But people waited there like 4 or 5 hours in line, and as soon as like the food was finished, then you couldn't get anything. So they were not restocking. Whatever was available there, they did. But it was interesting. It was an experiment they did, I guess. But it was funny because Momdani promised to do something like that. And actually, the capitalist, because it's Polymarket, so they're making a lot of money. So it's not a far left organization. So they actually did it, and people loved it, obviously. But it was interesting to see that. But yes, the grocery store is gonna. You're entering new industry. So even when you enter any new industry or start a new business, you're going to spend a lot of money just the first few years before you make any profit.
Yes.
So, and it's funny to me that people like villainize the grocery store, but I used to go to the farmer's market a lot. So at the farmer's market, you buy directly from the people that produce. But if you go to the people that produce, it's more expensive. It's not cheaper than the grocery store. So the grocery store are way more chain, because to get the food, you have to pay to them. You have to transport that. You have to pay the building, all staffing. So it's a lot more expensive type of operation than just a farmer who's selling directly to you. But when you go to a farmer's, very often it's actually more expensive than when you go to the grocery store. So I don't know why people complain about the grocery store, honestly.
Yes, that's true. And it has to do with the mixture of items. It's like if you went to a car parts store and bought all the parts it would take to assemble a car, it would be much more expensive than, buying a car. So, yes, interesting stuff. The other thing that I think upsets people, and probably me the most, I went to a community event here in town, and I ended up talking to some police officers, and I told them, really appreciate what you guys do. And they all came up and shook my hand, and, obviously they were appreciative. And this was at an event where spreading goodwill is part of what they do. So they were nice to me. But what I told them is basically this. I don't think people realize that wherever you are, whether you're driving down the road, or whether you're at the mall, or whether you're in the grocery store, you're at work, the only thing that is separating that moment that you are in and the purge is the police. That's it. That's the only thing that's separating you from the purge at any given moment is the police. And I don't know how it became fashionable to paint the police as the problem in society by the left. I find it unbelievable because you can't have anything. I don't care how your business acumen is as a mayor or a leader or anything else. Nothing is going to function if there isn't some sort of order and safety in the environment that you are in. I understand that New York right now is suffering from people not applying to be police. They're getting early retirements. They don't get any, like I said, the guys that risk their lives running at somebody who has a bomb. What part of this is going to break down for Momdani first? Because I can't believe when you make enemies of the people that are protecting the society you're presiding over, that is going to end well. Or is it the economics that's going to unravel first?
I mean, I think for the people who actually like really, really love him, like those far left people, young people, I don't think there is anything that will break it for them, honestly. So I think it depends on every different kind of population, type of group you are. Because, I mean, the Jewish people, like, they've seen already everything. Like, they don't need to see anything new from Momdani. They know what kind of person he is. They know how he's not there for his community. Mm-hmm. I think the Venezuelan community also, like, with what happened when, like, Trump took down Maduro, and Momdani and all the far left, including the DSA, they all did protests that were in support of Maduro. Mm-hmm. I mean, how can you, like, you can say I'm against having a war, but you cannot be against taking down a dictator, especially when like 8 million people like flee the country. Mm-hmm. So like they already lost it. Now with the Iran situation, where you have a lot of Iranian people who like obviously are celebrating. I went to a celebration even here, and people were like, had like Trump's pictures, the flag of Israel, thanking Bibi and Trump. So I think a lot of Iranian people are very mad with the left right now too. Sure. Because of like, yeah, like you say you're for the people, but now you're gaslighting a lot of population when they don't fit your narrative. Yes. So I think that's going to be tricky. About the police, I mean, that might get bad because they're saying that just like every year in general, because of retirement and everything, they're losing 3,000 NYPD. Mm-hmm. So if you do nothing, you're losing 3,000. So they have like around like 37,000, which to me it's a lot because in Los Angeles, it's like 9,000 police. Right. And Los Angeles is wider area. Yeah. So it's very weird to me, like hearing how many there are in New York and how little there are in Los Angeles, and you can feel it too. But they say if you do nothing, you lose 3,000 people every year. So the Eric Adams was saying that the 5,000 more people, more new NYPD should be hired. But that on top of just hiring the amount that you need to like replenish every year. So Momdani was always against hiring 5,000 police, and a lot of people were attacking Cuomo during the campaign because he wanted to hire more police. So there is, like, as you said, a lot of people on the left, they are against the police. They're against having so many. So that's going to be an issue because in general, if you don't put those extra 5,000 that other people were proposing, that's bad because it's already low. Then you're losing 3,000 in general just for retirement, but then you might lose even more because how Momdani doesn't have they don't have his back. So, and like there was a situation in New York actually recently, I don't know if it was like last month, it's like every week there is something new, so it feels like might have been 2 weeks ago, but it feels like 3 years ago. But what happened, there was a situation and it was all caught on the camera, the body camera, and the police went to respond to this person who was having like a mental episode. The mother called. They wanted she wanted to call the ambulance, but they were saying this person was kind of violent, so they sent the police to. So the police entered, and this person went to the kitchen and got like a knife and started going against the police. And you see all this in the body cam. And so this person kept going to the police. They tried to hide themselves behind, like in a different room, but then he managed to get in, and so they shot him. He's still alive, like no one died, but that was like a big episode in New York because even the police had to go to the hospital at a certain point. Had like they had some issue. It was like that it's not that they were perfect and the other guy was having issues. So, but Momdani went to visit the guy they shot. Didn't go and visit the police to make sure they were fine. And so, like, and because he's a supporter, like he wants to. Like he was always against, like he was pro defund the police. So now he say doesn't want to defund the police, but in his behavior, it's obvious that he doesn't want that much police. He doesn't want to support that. And this was another example that people were like, these people, like you can see in the video footage that the guy was attacking them. You cannot hate the police so much that at least go and visit them and show your, I don't know, like they're working for you. So you should really protect them too. It's not only the other way around. So when there was this bomb, I was actually surprised in his first post, he was actually thanking NYPD. And I was like, oh, well, this is a new one because in general, he doesn't even say that as much. But yes, there is that tension over there for sure. So between him and the police, and there is a bunch of people, they're like, well, we don't want the police. We should not have any police. And then there is the average human being that understands that you need the police.
Yes, you need the police.
Yeah.
I'm very much pro law enforcement. And I think one of the, without getting into a whole discussion about our judicial system, probably one of the greatest weaknesses of our judicial system is the discretion that prosecutors have in terms of what cases they will take and which ones they won't. They buy a lot of frustration from the police. They're the givers of much frustration to the police as well, who risk these guys bringing them in, and then the prosecutors say, nah. So anyway.
I've been thinking about that a lot too, because I was telling you how in Italy now we have this referendum that we need to vote, and it's about justice. So how to change the career between the DA and the judge, and how they're like voted in, how they get like a punishment, all those roles Meloni want to change, which is pretty crazy because it was gonna keep it short, but this was always a fight that the left had. They wanted to get this done, and now that the right, Meloni, is doing that, all the left is against it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty crazy, but that was always something that everybody said we need to reform and we need to make these changes to the constitution, because right now there is too much collusion between the DA and the judge, and this is not good for the people, because if the DA and the judge meet separately and they're all part of the same union, let's say, and they vote like those union, they vote for each other's career, they vote for each other punishment. How do you know that actually the judge is actually like is going to protect you when you are being accused of something, of your rights, and not just give the DA whatever they want? That's what Italy is like dealing with right now, and it's pretty bad. But
you've mentioned to me that you really like New York, and New York, for whatever reason, has an allure that I've got a lot of friends in New Yorkers, and it's like the the city that never sleeps, like the old. You're probably familiar with the Frank Sinatra, New York, New York.
Of course, yeah.
And there's this allure that's there despite all the problems. Do you feel that allure is going to stay there? And I know you have a future that might include New York. And what I think of at this point in time, when I think of New York, there was a science fiction movie years ago called Escape from New York when the crime got so bad in New York, they just walled it off.
Yeah. I watched that. It's a great movie.
And I'm kind of thinking that's the reality. That's probably more likely. What do you think the future is for New York?
I mean, like we've been like 2 months and a half into Momdani, and so many people have been complaining. So I'm not as worried about Momdani. It's more about all other positions that we don't think about that are still like filled by the DSA. So like the city councilor, a lot of like those smaller positions that maybe don't become super famous in television. Like a lot of people from the DSA are in those positions and they're going everywhere in the country. So even like here in Los Angeles, there is an election this year, and one of the people, she's actually endorsed. I don't know if she's endorsed, but she's part of the DSA too. So I'm more concerned about the DSA in general more than Momdani, because like he promised so much, so he can crash very fast in a situation like this. New York is always New York. I'm sure it has seen like worse time, so I'm sure it will be fine. I don't think it's gonna change the appeal, but it really depends who, because for some people like that, for me, I never lived there, so once I'll live there, I will tell you. We can have this conversation in 5 years and let's see what happens. But yeah, like even if the taxes are higher, you would still stay there. But depending what you want in life, if you're not that, I'm madly in love with New York. I don't even know why, but like I feel like I was born with my love for New York, and once I've been in New York, the energy and like everything, like my life obviously changed by New York since I made this documentary too. So obviously it changed my life, New York. But for regular people who just want a regular life, a 9-to-5 job, something simple, I don't think it makes sense for them to be in New York, probably, unless they were born and raised there. So I think there is always going to be that exchange of people, and we'll see who decides to remain, and that affects elections too.
Sure. So. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I got to tell you, these city taxes that they're talking about, like what 9.5%.
That's the property tax increase.
Yeah. Think about what that means. I'm not sure how it's compounded. Like,
it's like the 10% more. Like it's not like, okay, I don't know how much it is, but if it's like 4%, it's not going to be 14%. It's a 10% more of what it is. So I don't think it's such a crazy increase, but I don't know how much, because houses and apartment cost so much more there. And they're talking about how bad it is the way it's calculated, because they haven't changed the calculation in decades. So you might live in a neighborhood that maybe was trash in the past, and now it's actually gentrified. Maybe now it's very expensive and you still pay the old rate. And so people that live in great places, they pay a low amount. And people that maybe are in buildings in the Bronx that are not as good as like Manhattan, they might still be paying more property taxes than other people. So they need the reformation about that anyway.
Yes, it's going to be interesting. That would be something that... Well, because I got to tell you, if you just a moderate means, you have a moderately priced house, that can be that can be thousands of dollars every year. And I hate paying city tax. I don't mind federal so much. Really hate city tax. I don't know why.
We don't have city taxes in Los Angeles, so I never had to pay that. State taxes in California, like here, like you have to go like above a certain amount, but in general you don't pay that much if you're like middle class or everything. But like in Italy, for example, you don't pay the property tax on your first house. So if you have, and to me, like I understand that here, like a lot of the services are paid through that property tax, but you already, like, it's your only house if that's all you have, and it already costs you mortgage. You have to pay a lot of money. Here you have to pay the HOA, that is crazy amount every month. Like I don't understand, so expensive HOA, but then you have to pay also the property tax. So I don't even know how people that are saying that owning a house, it's cheaper than renting, because you have all these fees that you still have to pay forever.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And in some cases, we were checking out some houses down around the Columbus area, which is prime real estate in Ohio. And some of the property taxes were more than the mortgage. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. So, all right, we've been talking to Sara Alessandrini. And, well, of course, I mentioned before the documentary, This Is What New Yorkers Say, and it centers on the evolution of what happened with the media surrounding Andrew Cuomo. You can find that that's on Apple TV, correct?
Yeah, Apple TV, Tubi, YouTube on demand. It's Google Play and Zoom.
All right. And also she now has a Substack, Sara Alessandrini. Where else can people find you online?
I mean, the usual social media. It's like on Instagram, the Twitter or X, however you want to call it, Facebook. So yeah, if they go on my website, This Is What New Yorkers Say, they can get all this information. They can find the link. So yeah, they can read. If they want to learn more about Momdani, that article that I wrote on Substack, it's a long essay. And so it gives you everything, like all the possible controversy about him, counteracting each of his policies with the reality, how he ran the campaign, like the negative part, not the positive part. And also like how that connects and what it says about us as a society and like this generation, how we deal with complex issues and the state of populism, I guess, also around the world. So it mentions all these things.
You know, I think one thing that somebody like Sara does very well is perspective. You know, I'm an old dude that's stuck in my ways, and I don't know. Hopefully, I provide some perspective to the audience. Hopefully, I do a good job with that. But Sara, somebody like Sara, you know, is so important because we are so used to checking out people who are on our team, and if they're not on our team, we dismiss them. And we really have to get past that. I don't care what your leanings are. I mean, there comes a point where we start to have an agreement on what reality is if we can start solving the problems that we have. And someone like Sara does such a good job of bringing those perspectives. And I really admire your work. Sincerely, you're fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm Billy Dees. You can find me on social media, probably X, the former Twitter is probably like my social media home. Podcasting and the real timeness, the trending of X works very well for what I do. So that's kind of like my social media home, but you can find me in pretty much all the social media. Where you will have no problem finding me at all is on your favorite podcast platform. We are on them all. We have over a 10-year history now. And very easy to find the Billy Dees Podcast on all the major podcast platforms. Sara, thank you so much for hanging out with us again, and you're going to be with us again soon. So thank you so much, Sara.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, and I feel like we have like so much more we could have talked, but it's like, yeah, it's 1 hour.
Yes, absolutely. Always a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Billy Dees Podcast. Follow Billy Dees on X @BillyDees for updates about the program.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees Podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees Podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.